Some of the biggest changes in human history didn't start with a bang. They started with a mistake. Today, we're talking about one of those, a discovery born from a forgotten, moldy dish that would go on to save hundreds of millions of lives. This isn't just a science story. It's the story of how a simple accident literally unlocked the modern world. This is the incredible story of penicillin.
Just think about it for a second. The last time you got a paper cut, or maybe scraped your knee, you probably cleaned it up, slapped a bandage on it, and just forgot about it, right? It's a minor annoyance, something we take for granted as being, well, completely harmless. But what if that tiny little cut wasn't harmless? What if it could be a death sentence? Because for almost all of human history, that's exactly what it was. A simple scratch could get infected, and that could be it. Before the 1940s, this wasn't some rare freak accident. It was a terrifyingly common reality.
And this, right here, really puts it all into perspective. Just look. On the left, that's the world our great-grandparents lived in. Sepsis from a tiny cut. Pneumonia, often a killer. Major surgery was a life-or-death gamble. And on the right, well, that's the world penicillin built. It's a world where those same infections are manageable, surgeries routine, and people live longer. This was the problem that desperately needed a solution.
So, how did we get from that world to ours? Well, it wasn't with some grand genius plan. Not even close. It started with a messy lab, a vacation, and a stroke of just incredible luck. So let's dive into the happy accident that changed everything.
And here is the hero of our story, penicillin. So what is it? Simply put, it's a substance made by a common mold. But you can think of it as a microscopic assassin. Its one and only mission? To seek out and destroy deadly bacteria like Staphylococcus, the very thing behind everything from nasty skin infections to life-threatening sepsis.
Okay, now here's where the story gets really wild. So, 1928, Alexander Fleming makes this world-changing observation. A year later, he publishes his findings, and crickets. Nothing happens. For a full decade, one of the most important medical discoveries in history just sits there on a shelf, gathering dust. The potential was right there, but it was just completely overlooked.
So how did the discovery actually happen? It's almost unbelievably simple. Fleming was growing bacteria in a dish. A stray mold spore flew in through a window and landed on it. Now, most researchers would have just tossed that dish in the trash. It's contaminated, right? But Fleming, he looked closer. And he saw this halo, this clear zone around the mold where the bacteria just couldn't grow. That moment of pure observation, that was his genius. He realized something was actively killing the bacteria, and he gave it a name, penicillin.
So, if Fleming's discovery just sat on a shelf for 10 years, who finally picked up the torch? Well, this brings us to the next chapter. A team of incredibly determined scientists at Oxford University racing against the clock with World War II looming to turn this laboratory curiosity into a genuine lifesaver.
All right, so meet the team. Howard Florey, Ernst Chain, and Norman Heatley. These are the guys who took on the challenge that had completely stumped Fleming. Their mission was to take this mold juice, as it was called, and figure out how to extract it, purify it, and somehow make tons of it. But the problem was, penicillin was unbelievably fragile. Trying to work with it was like trying to bottle lightning. It would lose its power almost as soon as they isolated it. And this right here, this captures the brutal reality of their early work. Their very first human trial was on a police officer who was dying from a terrible infection. And at first, it was a miracle. He started to recover, and it was dramatic. But then, their tiny supply ran out. The infection came roaring back, and he died. That single tragic story proved two things at once. This drug was an absolute game changer, and they had to figure out how to make a lot more of it, and fast.
And that's exactly what they did. With a massive push from the governments and industries in the UK and the US, they finally cracked the code to mass production. And this didn't just help win battles in the war, it kicked off the entire penicillin revolution.
So what's this number? 2.3 million? Well, that's the payoff. By D-Day in 1944, Allied forces had 2.3 million doses of penicillin ready to go. And this one fact completely changed battlefield medicine. It saved countless soldiers from dying of infected wounds, which, up until that point, had been one of the biggest killers in any war.
And the impact wasn't just on the battlefield. Back home, diseases like bacterial pneumonia, which used to be a leading cause of death, saw their mortality rates just plummet after 1944, once the drug became widely available. I mean, look at this chart. You're not just looking at data here.
You're literally looking at a picture of millions of lives saved.
But penicillin's real legacy, its true impact, goes so much further than just curing infections. You see, it was an enabler. It was the safety net that made all of modern medicine possible. I mean, think about it. Procedures like organ transplants or chemotherapy, which basically destroy the immune system, they would be unthinkable without a powerful way to fight off infection. Almost every major medical breakthrough of the last 80 years is standing on the foundation that penicillin built.
But the story doesn't end on that high note, because every revolution has consequences. And the man who started it all, he saw the storm clouds gathering from the very beginning. And that brings us to the enduring warning of this so-called miracle cure. Just listen to these words. This is Alexander Fleming in his Nobel Prize speech way back in 1945. And what he says is just chillingly accurate. He's predicting the crisis of antibiotic resistance. He understood that if people misuse this miracle drug, if they didn't take enough of it, for example, it wouldn't kill the bacteria. It would just train them, teach them how to survive it. He saw our modern crisis coming nearly 80 years ago. And that brings us to this final, really critical question. The age of antibiotics, this incredible era of medicine, it all began with a happy accident. The challenge for us now is to make sure that through our own actions, our overuse and misuse of these precious drugs, we don't deliberately design its end.